Sentry mode activated. Searching. Could you come over here? I see you. Target acquired. Firing. No hard feelings. Goodbye.
Redacted is the 6th new map added to Battlefield 2042, accompanying the release of Season 6. It is the game's first infantry-only map layout and the second in the entire series to be fully indoors. The scale is small and tightly packed. Choke points and thin hallways make it evident that it is meant to recreate the classic Battlefield experiences of Operations, Metro, and Locker. But does it live up to such a legacy? Those two maps are divisive in almost every way possible, each with their own problems and achievements, and with their own loyal fan bases and staunch haters. It is expected that an infantry-only map like Redacted would create the same level of controversy. The crazy part? I submit to you that here, finally, a Battlefield map seeking to emulate the fast-paced linear grind was not only achieved, but surpassed that of its predecessors. Redacted's environment is heavily decorated in connection to its season theme. As such, it is set in a secret biological research facility in the aftermath of, well, some sort of chaotic failure or safety breach. Every single room is well detailed with medical and scientific equipment, ranging from the cybernetic and futuristic to the dark and mysterious. That it is not wrong to say that the map is by far the best themed in the game. Usually I would comment on the map's lighting design, but as it's entirely indoors, the question becomes how well lit is each area? The answer to that is extremely well, given the dilapidated concept. Although some areas are dimly lit, there really isn't a section where you're really squinting to see a player, thanks to the limited range and especially with 3D spotting. On top of that, thermal optics of 2042 are hugely advantageous here. Dark hallways, swinging lights, decrepit trees, blood spatters, shattered ceiling panels, automatic glass doors, even a testing ground with fake targets contributes to this gritty and unique atmosphere. It is one of the few maps in the entire series where I cannot possibly argue for any improvements on this front. It is simply fantastic. Looking at the map layout, we will see the linear configuration evoking thoughts of Locker. This is a 4-flag design which is larger than it looks, as the amount of pathing options exceeds that of the aforementioned map, much to its benefit. Starting with the A flag, Biological Disposal, which is placed practically right on top of the main deployment. In fact, both the A and D flag share this trait, such that it is impossible to discuss either flag without mentioning the inherent designs of each deployment, for good or worse. The A flag is placed in the center of a tightly packed room filled with several large incinerators taking up most of the space. This creates an area of hiding spaces excellent for capturing the point. However, getting to the flag from within the deployment can be a challenge. Despite there being multiple routes from the deployment to the objective, these can be camped pretty hard. There are 2 direct hallways on the ground floor, and 1 on the upper level which even provides a view of some furnaces. The south hallway, though it is out of bounds to enemies, is a straight path into a short curve, meaning aggressive players can dive in and kill US attackers trying to break out. The middle hall, also out of bounds, has limited line of sight blocks from the point, making it very easy to hit newly approaching enemies coming from the deployment. The most effective way to break out is via the upper level window, from which players can dive onto the point or loop around downstairs to flank enemies. However, here is one of Redacted's few major layout issues. Should the US team hold only A1, it is extremely difficult to break out of, and just as difficult to push into. It becomes one of the worst meat grinder areas of the map, which it usually tries its best to avoid. The cause of this grind comes down to the limited pathing options. There are a total of 3 ways out of A to the rest of the map, and 2 of them are from the flag room. The north door intersects with the upper level hallway, creating a singular choke point. The intention of a flanking route here just falls apart. On the south, the doorway turns into a short-edged hallway with some stairs, which becomes a major explosive fest. Even if a US team makes it to the top of the stairs, the large room which enemies hold gives so much space and angles that breaking out here is nearly impossible. I think a major redesign of this area is required to give another pathing option, and it can be located between them in the center. In the adjacent room, there is a lengthy wall which serves no purpose, and a hallway through here would be prudent. Meanwhile, the actual best option to break out is the lower connector tunnel spanning the length of the map from deployment to deployment. In the case of the US side, it runs clear past the A1 point, which is excellent. The problem lies in the layout within the deployment to incentivize it. There is only one entrance to the tunnel system, and you might need to backtrack a bit to reach it. Additionally, the spawn points within the deployment are often far away, directing players toward A1 instead. Usually, it is the AI bots who use this tunnel the most, which I believe should be encouraged to players in some other method, such as placing a spawn point within the tunnel itself. From the A flag, players progress through multiple pathing options, offices, and supply rooms before reaching the B point, stress testing. One of the 2 large domed biospheres on the map, the room is large, open, and filled with trees, grasses, and bushes, resulting in a vastly different environment. Several open containers stacked strategically create a close-quarters zone with plenty of cover, with the flagpole in the center. Most containers have destructible blue tiling on them, allowing for new firing angles or entryways to be created, though some are smaller than you think. The tallest container is just outside the flag radius, but provides ample protection and a great view of most of the area. Training targets are placed around the area, sometimes forcing a reaction shot. The B dome features 4 entrances from the west and 3 from the east, highlighting the lessons learned of needing more entrances around such a design. There are 2 other features of note in this zone. The first is the high ground on the north, which is heavily forested and provides great sightlines of the dome. It also provides one of the craziest camping spots, allowing players to see down the long stairway into the northern hall, and wipe entire squads with brutal efficiency. The last feature is that of the fan room. Almost 2 entrances in one, players can enter through the doorway or through the fans themselves at the upper level, which also provides an excellent high ground position. Players inside the B zone can hop up the nearby rocks and into the fan for a quick and yet risky counterpush. Pushing further eastward, a series of rooms sit between the 2 domes, containing a smaller area holding the medbay and a larger decontamination room with showers providing sizable sight blocks. Between them, a fence allows players to see enemies in the adjacent room, and can be fired through for kills. Moving on, the second biodome containing the C flag is called Field Testing. By far the most dark and eerie zone of the map, it features lower levels of lighting, a bit of fog, and an almost ancient-looking forest which has overrun the area. Far rockier than the other dome, this zone provides higher boulders and canyons, almost giving it the impression of being inspired by parts of Battlefield 1's Achi Baba. Not a bad lineage to have. This provides more sneaky high ground positions to use as cover and ambush enemies from above. In the center, the flag is set surrounded by a smaller cluster of training structures, each without rooftops, overgrown with foliage, and containing more fake targets. It is a major close quarters zone, one which you must pay attention to if you don't wish to be flanked. The walls provide ample cover, though point-blank encounters are common, and you must be wary of hiding dozer players. This dome has one weakness, and that is some of its spawn points, which place you within the dome, often in front of enemies. Like the B dome, one side has 4 entrances, while the side to the D flag has 3. Finally, passing through a small security checkpoint and inoperable elevator room is the D point, manufacturing. This area contains equipment producing cybernetic prosthetics held within large cryopods. The objective sits in the middle hallway between two rooms, and though the area is large, it is surprisingly easy to capture, or to simply overwhelm. The mostly glass decorations provide more sightlines and less cover than the A flag, and it is very easy to be flanked while trying to capture. While not as bad as the A flag in the situation of trying to move from it to the rest of the map, the main base deployment of the RU side is even more poorly laid out, hindering the team's effort to break out from a full capture. The flag's openness combined with the majority of the US team sitting on the flag already make for a challenge. But once again, the pathing options and spawn points are not effective enough. Although there are 3 hallways which lead to the ground floor, these can be camped well. A bigger problem is the upstairs lounge, which has sightlines which can cover the flag. This lounge area can allow US players to dive into the upstairs enemy deployment and wipe new players from behind. Moreover, there is even time to turn the corner and shoot down the straight hallway and return with no penalty. Either more cover is needed in this upstairs hall, or a second turn is needed. On the main level, I would even go a step further and create a new hallway at this wall location, which loops north and flanks the flag altogether. Then we cannot forget the underground connecting tunnel from the Russian deployment. Unfortunately, this one is also worse than its counterpart. Like the US side, backtracking is required to reach the one entrance off to the side, and more direct spawn points should incentivize it. However, even though the long zipline around the D flag is out of bounds for the US team, there is absolutely no cover in this long tunnel, making players on this zipline effectively target practice. Taking one last moment to talk about the deployment zones for each side, I want to say that despite a few layout issues, the level design team should be commended for the substantial improvements in pathing options toward the edge flags, compared to older maps like Metro, Locker, and Underground. This is exactly what these types of designs need, and in fact, the extended areas of the deployment zone around the gimme flags are precisely the modifications I suggested in my video on Battlefield 5's Operation Underground, so naturally I'm thrilled. One major feature of Redacted which does not get enough credit, nor enough usage yet, is the long connecting access tunnel on the south of the map, which runs the entire span from one main base to the other. Set a floor below everything else, it must be accessed via zipline hatches located periodically along its length, usually between flag locations. These zipline hatches can be camped from either level, so it necessitates caution if you plan to jump in, and any gadgets to reveal enemies on the map is recommended. To facilitate faster movement down the corridors, long ziplines are placed at multiple sections of the tunnel. These are simultaneously highly useful, highly vulnerable, and highly enjoyable to camp for a multi-kill. This connecting hallway is essentially the Redacted equivalent to the outside snow section of Operation Locker. However, right now it gets far less usage than its predecessor. I believe 2 factors contribute to this. First, despite multiple entrances to the tunnel, there is an out-of-sight, out-of-mind factor at play. The outside mountain pass on Locker had huge openings and blinding light at each of its doorways, such that you couldn't ignore it. There very well may be a good chunk of the player base that doesn't even know that the Redacted tunnel exists. Second, to touch on a point previously noted, despite spanning from one main deployment to the other, the spawn points of the mains are not conducive to filtering players in this direction. Most times, players must backtrack deep into the mains to find the tunnel entrance, and as such they instinctively move forward into the meat grinder instead. AI bots seem to be the most frequent users of these sections of the map. Regardless, this long connecting hallway is essential to the map's success, offering a major flanking route and helping to break any stalemates at the main floor areas. Next, I want to briefly touch on the subject of breakthrough mode in Redacted. I've seen multiple tweets and posts on Reddit from players saying they reinstalled the game to play the new map, tried it only in Breakthrough, and hated it so much that they uninstalled again after a few rounds. Well, frickin' duh! Breakthrough is not a mode to find fun and enjoyment on Redacted, but this isn't surprising at all. In fact, it was predicted by many players at 2042's launch, when, while we were questioning the absence of an infantry-focused meat grinder map, understood that the specialist's abilities would lead to gameplay insanity and stupidity far exceeding that of Operation Metro. While the Conquest mode does its best to mitigate this factor as much as it can, Breakthrough does not. In fact, it makes it even worse by closing off certain hallways and even the long underground connector, funnel players into a death trap full of explosive spam and abilities which border on cheating. It is exactly what we expected to happen, and players should simply not play this mode unless you thoroughly enjoy it. Furthermore, it is not like most Battlefield players would even play Locker on a 64-player rush or a hypothetical Breakthrough with the same map limitations, even if it was possible, and it would turn out exactly the same. Battlefield 3 Metro players played Rush as a staple, but knew how difficult and downright stupid it could be with anything more than 32 players. Be reasonable. Play Redacted in Conquest only the way it should be played. Redacted is a map which was sorely missing in 2042. I say that because even though Battlefield is about vehicles and mixed dynamic warfare, there must be a place for the infantry designs. There must be that variety. In fact, I'd say that a second infantry-only environment should also be added to 2042, this time with a non-linear layout akin to Tala and Pearl markets, to provide a non-meat grinder alternative and even more variety. You might not enjoy Redacted, but the style of map is a necessity in a Battlefield game and a huge draw for many players. This brings me to my final points. Considering the type of small, meat grinder-ish map Redacted is meant to be, it thrills me to know that the level design team clearly understood the frustrations and criticisms of Metro and Locker, and took significant steps to alleviate those issues. Largely, they succeeded. The multitude of pathing options via hallways, tunnels, and corridors, at least 4 entrances to the 2 center objectives each, more open areas in conjunction with tight doorways, and multiple exit routes out of the deployment zones are major wins. As I have detailed, there are a few lingering issues, such as a pathing option snafu around the A and D flags, and notably a wonky and sometimes confusing pathing layout in the deployments themselves. Also mentioned, spawn points can be problematic, especially on flags where enemies are plentiful. This is a common issue on maps of this size, and one players must take into account when looking to defend an objective. There is also concern over certain weapon metas on maps like Redacted, such as the prevalence of shotguns. Obviously, shotguns are going to be more effective on maps like this. Metro, Locker, Zeba Tower, Pearl Market, Fort DeVoe, Underground, all face the same issue. But this is not a problem with the maps directly. Rather, it is part of each game's overall weapon design and balance, and can shift over time. A final small but easily fixable issue of the map is the super fast rate at which tickets of one losing team decrease while full kept. This must be adjusted here, as players should be granted more time to break out of the deployment, especially since layouts make it largely possible. Redacted hits all the right notes at a time in the game's life when it was absolutely critical to do so. Great gameplay, whether just a few players or a full server. Excellent pathing options, flag distinctiveness, atmospheric and effective lighting, substantial cover, the best environmental artwork and detail the game has yet seen, limited effectiveness to most specialists, or a rare chance for certain others to shine, and finally an infantry-only experience in a title desperate for it. While Conquest is a gem, Breakthrough is a distorted nightmare which should largely be avoided. It will no doubt be as divisive in the long run as its legendary predecessors, but arguably learns from their mistakes and does a better job for the sake of player satisfaction. Conquest 8.5 out of 10. Breakthrough 5 out of 10.
Are you still there?